Hello, ladies and gentlemen. I'm back to start your virtual learning. Today's lesson is the start of Chapter 7. Your homework will pop up. You guys need to read in the text 202 to 209, and this worksheet review will show up. It'll be in a Google Forms. It'll be in the classroom. Before we get started, the warm-up question, I want to get your brains going. Why do you organize your kitchen? So if you think to yourself, organize my kitchen. What does he mean by that? One of my kids' least favorite jobs, putting the dishes away. When you put your dishes away, plates go in one spot, cups go in another. You know, we have salad forks and regular forks and butter knives and sharp knives. That's organizing. Well, how did you organize them? You organize them by their traits. Big forks, little spoons, big spoons. You have spatulas in a drawer probably. So that's classification at its finest. So let's get into the whole chapter. So, classification has actually been going on for thousands and thousands of years. Aristotle, one of the famous Greek philosophers, actually started classification, although he was really, really wrong. The Greeks tried to classify everything as either plant or animal. They tried to classify things as being made up of earth, wind, fire, or water. And we know it's just not quite right. He's famous because he was first. So, he could only look at, did it swim in the water? Well, then it was a fish. We all know that there are plenty of things that swim in the water that aren't fish. Whales and dolphins aren't fish. We know there are things that grow out of the ground that look like plants that aren't plants. You know, mushrooms kind of look like plants, especially the ones that get the nice red cap on the top. Those are clearly not plants. Even though if you pull a mushroom up out of the ground, it actually has a root system called rhizoids that looks very much like roots. I'm going to give you a second here, and I'm going to pause the video, and we're going to look at these pictures of, I got a black bear and I got a grizzly bear. What traits could you find right now that tell you that both those are bears, although not the same thing? All right, did you jot anything down? I hope you did. Bears have a very distinct snout. You have fur. Very large animals, although the black bear is significantly smaller than the brown bear. You can see real clearly they have claws, they have teeth. The colors are different, but they have a very thick, furry coat. Obviously, they're very massive, very muscular. Their ears are very, very similar here and here. So those are some of the types of features that you would look at if you were doing classification. The black bear is called Ursus virginicanus. The grizzly bear is Ursus arctos, as in Arctic. The definition of classification. You guys did your definitions the other day. Classification is the grouping of things according to similar characteristics. Probably all have a sock drawer, an underwear drawer, a t-shirt drawer, a drawer for your gym shorts. You know, in your closet, do you put dress clothes in one area and hanging clothes for another? Or do you have baseball cards that you have sorted? Do you have fishing lures sorted? I know that fishing season started today. The study of classification is called taxonomy. All of chapter 7 is on taxonomy. It comes from the Greek word, this is taxis, not taxi if you were in a big city, which means arrangement. Taxonomists are scientists who work in the field of taxonomy. You don't have to be a molecular biologist to be a taxonomist. You just want to study new organisms and make sure that you find new organisms and then classify them to where they go. Make sure that you're watching the videos. This is Mary Poppenroth. I've used her before. Domain is the new taxon. A taxon is a level in the levels of classification. Taxon. Domain, kingdom, phylum, class, order, family, genus, and species, which actually come in section 2. Good systems of classification have lots of levels or groups, with each one becoming more and more specific. The most specific is species, because it is specific. Taxonomy uses Latin. They use Latin because the only country to use Latin is still in the Vatican City in Rome. The Pope would use Latin, nobody else does. Since it's not being used, the language doesn't change. Scientists do not want classifications to change because once you classify them, we want them to stay the same. Many times we use words like, in the 70s, I used to watch a lot of 70s music growing up. And then they would say, oh man, that is so bad. But it didn't mean that it was bad. It actually meant that bad was good. And then it became bad was bad, and now bad is back to good again. So there's all kinds of ways that words have changed. Classification is used based solely on, used to be used solely on physical characteristics. They did not have the ability to see internal organisms. They could not look at the cells. They couldn't look at the DNA. So the original classification was solely on the physical structures. Today, classification starts with physical because we look at the organism, and then it heads to, just like every other type of evidence that you need, genetics. They read the DNA of the organism, they get the genome of that organism, and then you can compare the genomes of that organism. The more closely related the genes, the more closely related the organisms are. Two organisms can share a lot of the same characteristics. This one here is from your book, the family Felidae. Those are the cats. So all of your cats are going to have claws, the tail, very, very similar characteristics to cats. Why do we group things by classification? We group things via classification because it allows a person to become really, really good or an expert on certain groups. My professor in college was a specialist in, one of my favorite professors anyhow, was in invertebrate zoology. Those were insects and macroinvertebrates that you could look at. So he would look at birds and butterflies and how they would eat them. He would look at water insects. He would look at parasitic insects and all these stuff. He's just a specialist in that. Well, that's one group of classification. Taxonomists are really, really, really studying evolution. The more closely related two organisms are, the closer they are together in terms of history and evolution of Earth. Last but not least, the two definite types of evidence. Physical evidence. Mass. How much does the organism have as far as size, the shape, the color, or the structure? Birds are clearly different than reptiles, but they're related. If you would look at the structure of their bones, birds' bones and reptile bones are extremely similar. And then everything today works with genetic evidence. You sequence the DNA, if it's 98% the same, they're extremely similar. Humans and chimpanzees are like 97% the same. That's pretty close. Humans and pigs are like 94% or something like that. So these are some cats. Automatically, they're all cats. Well, they all have fangs. Some of them can roar. Lions, tigers, cheetahs. Some of them can't. They have retractable claws. They have whiskers. Those are traits that you would look at. They have different fur, but they all have fur. They all give birth to live young. They all have a backbone, would be something type of trait that you would look at if you were classifying things. All right. Check to see if you were listening. If the statement is true, thumbs up. If the statement is false, thumb down. Now, since I'm videoing this, I'll give you the statement. I'm going to wait a few seconds for you to signal at home. Check yourself, and then I'll tell you the answers. Linnaeus started classification. And the answer is false. That was Aristotle. Classification of organisms uses similarities. Classification of organisms uses similarities. And the answer is true. The more similar they are, the more closely related they are in terms of classification. The study of classification is taxation. The study of classification is taxation. Thumbs up or thumbs down. Did you get it at home? It should be false. The study of classification is taxonomy. Taxation, if you ask your parents, is how the government taxes us to pay for whatever they need to. Genetic evidence of classification deals with structures in the skeleton. Genetic evidence of classification deals with structures in the skeleton. Is that true or false? And the answer is false. That would not be genetic evidence. The skeleton would actually be physical evidence. Most scientists don't use DNA for classification. Most scientists don't use DNA for classification. Is that true or is it false? Are you signaling? It is false. Today, every type of classification is going to use DNA. The number and shape of a leaf is a type of physical evidence. The number or shape of a leaf is a type of physical evidence. Is that true or is that false? The size, shape, and number of the leaf is physical evidence. Did you get them all right? If not, go back, review this section before you do your homework, guys. So your assignment will be in the Google Classroom. It is 7.1. Make sure you're doing the reading 202 to 209. Thank you for following along. If you have any questions, hit me up on Remind. That ends today's lesson.